All right, everybody, we're back and up to speed. Interview 7 of 8. Daniel and I are talking to the candidates that are up for the California Insurance Commissioner seat. We are having a blast doing so. Daniel, how are you?
I'm great this morning.
No, you didn't give me a
Oh,
fantastic.
I'm sorry. I'm fabulous this morning.
Fabulous is what we're looking for. Yes. So, as mentioned, we have been digging deep and talking to all the different candidates for the seat for the upcoming primary race here, June 2nd. And today we're joined by an impressive man, Mr. Robert Howell. How are you today?
I'm doing fine.
Excellent. Well, we can't wait to dive in. What we're doing here is we're getting to know all the candidates, their big levers, their mission, their vision, their focus on what it might take to kind of turn this California marketplace into a more harmonious place, as I like to say. I always like to start our conversation off with, a disclaimer that this is not political. This is not about party. This is just about getting the information about the candidates out to the constituents and the voting public so that we can all make our best decision when it comes to filling the seat in Sacramento. California isn't just dealing with an insurance crisis. It is becoming the national case study for what happens with climate risk, regulation, consumer protection, and it's all colliding in real time. And whether you're an insurance agent, homeowner, business owner, this conversation affects us all. So with that, sir, I'd like to set the table and just dive on in to some of your, focus points about who you are, what you stand for, and why you're running for this office.
Okay. Well, for starters, I'm a homeowner. Second of all, I have my own business. So from those 2 points, that I'm definitely in that camp. The why I'm running for this office? Well, mostly, I know it's kind of corny, but I've been trying to run for several offices over the last 6 or 7 years. And when I ran for insurance commissioner 4 years ago, at the time, I was only a Republican running, and the bulk of what you just described, all the problems in California are about, as far as I'm concerned, have everything to do with Sacramento. And as long as Sacramento's run by one party, either side, I'll give you that, the chance of getting anything really done is minimal. So I'm making an effort to see if somehow I can make a difference, and that I can do. I have the resources to be able to do this in a small way, and so that's why I'm running. And I did make it to the ballot. Did get 4 million votes, but so that's why I'm running again, mostly because of that name recognition. I do not have the 20 or 30 million dollars it takes to make a statewide campaign for a job that pays 120K or whatever it is a year. That's nuts. And I don't have any allegiance to anybody, maybe my children and my grandchildren. Leave it at that.
Those are good allegiances to have.
Absolutely.
Everything. They're everything.
So when we talk about, California as a marketplace, you have the top, 7 out of the 12 carriers exit or limit coverage, since 2022. And we've watched this kind of new marketplace transpire where we have a lot of the non-admitted marketplace becoming somewhat of the heroes and the savers of the day because the admitted carriers are like, we're out of here. We're not doing this anymore. If elected, what is your stance with creating a, competitive, marketplace that really can make sense for not only the carriers to be in business here, but the consumers when they're purchasing the insurance products?
Okay, well, when you talk about people leaving, I'm assuming you're talking about mostly homeowner insurance, dealing with fires and that sort of thing, right? Okay, so tune it to that market. I have an idea that might be a little bit radical, but I'm kind of like the idea that insurance companies are not allowed to cherry pick, period. Either you sell all of California or you don't. And people say that's kind of crazy, and people might actually leave the marketplace. That may be true, but if you want to have any chance of fixing Sacramento, the only thing the insurance commissioner can really do is apply heat on the people who make all the wrong decisions, from my point of view, to fix all these things. And on the other hand, I think that's an issue. Now, the FAIR plan, which is Plan F in a lot of cases. My brother's insurance, he lives in an area that's got issues, and his insurance went up like 4 times or some stupid amount. My next door neighbor buys his insurance for his daughter from Lloyd's of London. So, I'm not an insurance person. I run a business. I'm an executive. My job is to sit down and listen to people, surround myself with people who know what the hell they're doing, and listen to what they're trying to talk about, support their efforts, and make an executive decision based on what I'm told. Now, over the course of the last campaign time, I do have one thing that maybe hasn't come up yet. And if you're and this is in the defense of the insurance companies, by the way, this is in their defense. If there's a thing called a flood, act of God, that wipes out an entire town, you can buy separate flood insurance. I don't need to because I'm on a hill. On the other hand, if there's a catastrophic earthquake, another act of God, they have separate earthquake insurance. separate from your regular homeowners insurance. Now, what I'd like to know is how come we can't set up something like the same thing for fire insurance, which is typically man-made, by the way. I'm not too sure God made a lot of these fires, fire power plants and not putting out fires in the first place and stupid rules and stupid regulations and all that kind of stuff. Those are all man-made issues. We can fix those, right? Or at least work on them. So anyway, at the end of the day, I think we should have a third type of insurance that's catastrophic fire insurance, and then people can make a choice. So if insurance says, okay, I'm going to cover up to X amount of dollars, which is probably true for flood insurance and earthquake insurance and similar. I don't know the gory details of all the detail. I need to surround myself with people who do know the gory details. And
So
then
on that, Robert, real quick, I'm going to stop
Go
you
ahead.
there on just one
Go
thing.
ahead.
I do business in a number of states, and in like Texas, we have wind and hail. Same thing. It's a natural, and we'll have a separate deductible. So we'll have a regular deductible for everything else, and then you'll have a wind and hail deductible. And
Okay.
we know Samantha and I, we've seen the policies. And there's a lot of the non-admitted that'll do a regular policy on the non-admitted market, and then have a separate wind and a separate fire deductible for wildfire catastrophe. And
Okay.
I know I've talked to a lot of the big carriers, the Travelers, the Safeco, or Liberty now, Mercury, and that's just not something that's being allowed currently in the preferred market. Is that something you're kind of talking about?
In general, my point is I need to listen to both sides of the story. I'm going to sit mostly on the side of the table with the consumers. So that's a given. I know I need insurance. I know it costs too much. I know there's all kinds of heartburns. I know people are upset with insurance companies, but I don't know is how I can present that to everybody in a fair way. Now, I know it's not supposed to be political, but based on the person that's there now, I don't know how I could possibly do any worse. So that's a different issue completely. I don't want to touch that one. That's a third rail. But at the end of the day, I think you need somebody in this office that's willing to listen to everybody and make a decision that makes sense. On the other hand, I have studied Prop 103 at least a little bit. I tried to read it. I'm not a lawyer. I don't understand the fine print. Other than almost virtually every single point, there are exceptions. There's exceptions for every single point. So at the end of the day, all the rules can be bent and tweaked or thrown away or whatever by lawyers or third parties or insurance companies, whatever. So that's a problem. So as an insurance commissioner, what I'd have to do is sit down and on a given point, on a given detail, how do we proceed on that particular thing? But then if there's any kind of change, as far as I can tell, I got to go back to Sacramento and let them make all the decisions to change all the rules. And as long as one party choice and that one party disagrees, that's as far as that goes. So that's really why I'm doing this. We need to figure out I need to have a different kind of voice for the people. I'm somebody that's actually going to listen to. I'm not going to travel around the world on people's nickels. So I'm not going to do any of that. So at the end of the day, I think the point I want to get across here is that, one of your questions, you're not a politician, and that's absolute fact. So anyway, go from there. Although I do dabble along this kind of more of a hobby locally, but on this particular level, I do seriously think that we need a different kind of voice in this position.
Well,
And
with
that's
that
me.
being said, I think time to market is the biggest hurdle that we run into with our carriers in our marketplace, because the rates, that are given to the Department of Insurance for increases and decreases, on average are taking about 300 days to either get approved or not get approved. Right. And a lot of the issues with carriers is they can't get the rate to make it make sense to do business in our state. Prop 103 and also the state, other states average is around 60 days. And Prop 103 stated that they needed to get the rate filings done within 60 days, and it's just not happening. As a businessman and as somebody who is not, politically charged in that way, I mean, when you look at that as a headline problem, what would you implement if elected to fix that? I mean, that, in our opinion, and I think any agent will tell you, that is the number one issue.
Okay. Well, I looked into that a little bit. At the end of the day, whatever I could possibly do, I have to get somebody to approve, because according to the rules, as far as I can tell, anybody can file a grievance. Third parties can do all they want to do to delay everything. Judges can get involved. All kinds of delay. I mean, you can delay. I used to have an apartment house, and magic word is used to, and renters can do all kinds of things to slow down evictions that are beyond stupid. And at the end of the day, So I believe on that particular point, again, I'm not intimately known the details, so that would be job one. But at the end of the day, I don't think there's anything I could actually do to prevent any of this. Now, does that mean I don't support it? Well, that's a different question. You're asking if I can do anything about it. That's the point.
Yeah,
So if that makes any sense.
well, what Samantha's kind of hitting on is the speed to market. So I go to a carrier and I'll use the automatic water shutoff system, which is super important nowadays in homes because of the amount of water leaks and damage from slab leaks during some of the homes out there. If I go to a main carrier and say, hey, Mercury, Travelers, whoever it is, I think you should do something and give a discount if a client puts this on there because it's a better chance of them saving a future claim. Most of them aren't going to do it in a timely manner because they have to do it in a rate filing, which can take, as Samantha mentioned, 300 some days to do it. It's going to cost them millions of dollars to do it because they have to do all their legal paperwork and justification on why they're doing it. But the non-admitted carrier, I can go to a LyteSpeed, a Heritage, a Delos and say, hey, this water shutoff valve system is amazing. There's the fin, there's the mow and flow, whichever one. I have them on my property. They think that's a great idea. They can have that in their system and rated in 2 weeks. It's the speed to market. And you mentioned on how the rates can be affected. It's the time frame that it takes the carrier to do it. So the rates that you're looking at now, it's kind of like the freeway system in California. I use that as a great example. By the time they start building a freeway or expanding a freeway, they're 10 years behind. So that's what's happening in the rate filings. They filed for a rate today. It's a year later. And in that year, labor prices have gone up, material prices have gone up, everything has changed and they got to redo it again. And they can only cap out at a certain percentage or they have to go to an intervener and there's a different process on getting their rate back. So those are the kind of things we're looking at, how that can be fixed in the system.
Okay, we'll take that little particular detail. First of all, on the freeways, my parents bought a house in 1965, and when they passed away, I found the paperwork. It was a big deal about the new freeway they were going to build. The dirt was there, but the freeway took another 30 years or something to actually show up. So anyway, whatever, so I can relate to that. But on something like a common sense, kind of an addition to your house, I mean, for starters, I'm surprised that the building departments across the state don't require it in the first place. I mean, that's a different issue. The second thing is if insurance companies will give people a discount for doing, like one of your questions talks about, prepping your facility, your property. I'm all for that. I mean, I think that makes perfect sense. And matter of fact, one of my best friends has a piece of property it's in a bad area, if you will call that. And the fire marshal, I think it's a great idea. The fire marshal came to him and said, okay, tell you what, if you do the following things to your property, he's up in the woods. He's got, pretty big sized piece of dirt. And if you do the following things, we'll come out and inspect it and they have a list of things you need to do. And if you do all these things, then we'll put you on the good guy list.
Home hardening inspection is what it's called.
Whatever you want to call it. But at the end of the day, this is very practical. The fire marshal guy said, look, we got X number of people, we got X number of trucks, we got X number of this, we got a humongous area. So you figure out where we're going to go first. And
Yeah,
it's not rocket science.
It isn't. And we're going to dive into that and later on in our conversation, because I think that's something we could definitely unpeel a little bit more. Daniel, I want to jump into Prop 103 and really kind of understand Robert's stance on, the different issues around that subject, because that's a big one.
It is a big one. So
pick one detail, one thing at a time, because I do agree with some of it.
Perfect. Robert, Proposition 103 passed by the voters in 1988, establishing the core framework for how insurance is regulated in California. The prior approval rate process review, the intervener process, the specific rules about what insurers can and cannot consider in pricing. Nearly 4 decades later, which elements of the framework do you believe still serve California consumers well, and which do you believe need updating to reflect the realities of the current market? And I know you said on Prop 103, and you're a business owner, you understand, most people don't realize that the carriers up until recently weren't allowed to use reinsurance, which is the insurance they buy to protect themselves, and certain marketing things as an expense.
Okay, well, first of all, I do not know all of the gory details of what you just asked me. Okay. The bottom line is I have a perception of what that means. And the first thing I need to do is I need to surround myself with people who can understand the gory details. Because a lot of the things you talk about, like, the consumer watchdog guys and all these kind of third-party people, a lot of those rules I think are cast in stone as far as I can tell. So as insurance commissioner, I'm not too sure I can change any of that stuff from what I've been able to figure out so far, even if I wanted to, unless I go to Sacramento And if I go to Sacramento, I think we all understand what's going to happen there. So do I have empathy for some of these issues? Absolutely. But I'm not going to sit here and say I'm going to go out and fix a bunch of stuff that I don't think, first, I don't fully understand. And second of all, and as an executive, my job is not to micromanage stuff. On my business, I've got a team of people that know what they're supposed to be doing, and I have to listen to them. And the magic word there is listen, right? And say, okay, based on what they're telling me, and I have to throw some of my own personal stuff in there while I'm at it, of course, everybody does that, make an intelligent decision based on hopefully are facts. And right now, as a person sitting on the outside looking in, I'm not too sure I have any idea what's going on in the insurance commission. I sure as don't know what the facts are. And I tried to read the Prop 103 document. And like I said earlier, as far as I can tell, there's exceptions for absolutely everything. And if you want to get rid of the exception, you have to go back to the well in Sacramento and have them fix it. So that's a very complicated issue. Now, do I have sympathy for it? Absolutely. Does it make sense that business has to somehow survive and make a profit? You can't make a killing. There's a difference. I think that's a perception out there that people think the insurance companies are making gazillions of dollars. And as far as I know, maybe they are. But I, as an insurance commissioner, need to be able to explain that simple terms to people without a bunch of legalese. To say this is why they wanted to raise. I think it makes sense, or it doesn't make sense, and we take it from the next step after that.
Well, let me talk about intervener, like, because you mentioned that one. Under Prop 103 intervener provisions, outside parties, the third party you mentioned, most prominently consumer watchdog, can participate in the rate proceedings and recover fees for that participation, with consumer watchdog alone having been awarded more than $18 million in intervener fees since 2003. Supporters argue it creates a consumer check on insured rate filings. Critics argue it slows the rate review, increases litigation costs, and are passed on to the policyholders as a function of the subsidy to a small number of participating groups. What is your view on the intervener process as you know it and as currently operates, and would you seek to change that and how that function and how we see the fees are awarded? So right now, the intervener process, I'll give you a little highlight if you don't know it. I, as a carrier, say I need a 8.4% rate increase to stay sustainable. Since it's over a 6.9%, the watchdog group gets to step in and say, well, we want to review all the documents, and that prolongs that inspection period out there. They get awarded a fee for doing that process, and then that fee is passed on to the consumer back on that from the carrier as an intervener charge on your rate. So at the bottom of your policy, you'll see a $16 fee, an $8 fee, whatever it is, because it's shared across everybody else. How do you think that it plays out? And do you think that's something we should continue doing to extend the process?
Okay, well, that's fair. Is it fair to have independent third-party people look at all these deals and come back with their own points of view? I think that's fair. I mean, I don't want anybody to be able to make all the decisions along the way. Now, as far as the interveners, or press that properly, those people, the bottom line is you take $18 million over more than 20 years. If that ends up saving, I don't know the details, I'll freely admit that, but if that ends up saving consumers, significantly more than that, or more importantly, it keeps everybody honest. Now, from your guys' point of view, I'm assuming that you don't agree with that point, and that's fair. At the end of the day, I'm not so sure that having a third party to look at some of this stuff makes sense. On the other hand, I do believe that the insurance commissioner has the power to pick or choose who these people are. Now, that's another discussion.
I don't think they do. I think, as you mentioned, so Prop 103 was written by the watchdog group, and
Right.
they put in there that they're the only ones that can really
Well,
do
that's
the
a problem.
That's the
I
problem.
agree with that one. That's sort of like having the same person in charge of everything. And I, as a general rule, I like the idea of having a third party, check everything, but to have exclusivity, which means you have all kinds of power that maybe you shouldn't have, that's a different story. But I do believe in some of the points that they've, I read their stuff, and some of their stuff, especially all the sunshine stuff, I agree with that 100%. So
I'll hit you with another one here on Prop 103. Prop 103 can be amended by the legislature only if the amendment furthers the purpose of the initiative, a standard that has been interpreted narrowly by the courts. That makes meaningful statutory reform difficult without going back to the voters. As insurance commissioner, would you support legislative or ballot effort to modernize specific provisions of Prop 103? And if so, which provisions would you want as your priorities?
Okay, well, for starters, when you say it's subject to interpretation, a little side story. I got sued one time for my business because we had a guy sue me over a contract dispute. He wanted to break the contract over one word. Word was parts, by the way. And our definition of that was right out of the Webster's dictionary. And $250,000 later, I ended up winning. But anyway, you can fight battles with lawyers over words. Now, if you want to have an initiative, other than the hassle of doing that and getting all the signatures and whatnot, in California, I'm all for that, but I also know that a judge can come along and totally trash it. So that's a tough question too. So the bottom line is I don't think it's fair to have a single person doing this, just like I don't think a single party should have control. It's really the same difference to me.
One more on that, we'll get into this. So California currently has among the highest FAIR Plan enrollment, the longest rate review timelines, and the most significant non-renewal activity in the country for personal lines insurance. Reasonable people disagree about how much of this is attributed to Prop 103, how much is to wildfire risk, and how much is to regulatory choices within the existing framework. In your analysis that you've done, what share of the current crisis traces back to Prop 103 framework itself versus how it has been administered, and what does your analysis imply about how to approach the if elected?
Okay, well, in my personal opinion, I think that I'm sure there's little bits of everything, but as far as I can tell, that the fire issues and the catastrophic fires and the news it creates and all the catastrophic things you see, and your whole community burns down, Paradise and all the other places. I mean, that makes front page news. I mean, there's been what 50,000 fires in California in the last 8 years. I looked that number up. It's a lot of fires, but the big ones get all the publicity. So the public thinks it's an issue with the wildfires, and so that's where I'm at. So I don't know the gory details up to that, but the bottom line is I think it's fair for the insurance companies to complain about the fact that why are they responsible for burning down the entire town when the Sacramento was the problem from my point of view. So that's that's a political
When we look
answer.
at that, you mentioned 8 years. Our biggest fires we've had in the state of California have been in the last 8 years. What has changed in the last 8 years? Forest management has changed. You
Right.
know, before they used to let the wildfires burn and they would control it when it got towards popularized area. Now they basically, you can't do that. You can't take away the dead timber. You can't. If a tree falls down in the woods, you got to save it for the spotted owl. And how do you feel about forest management? And do you think that has led to the issue that we're dealing with in these major wildfires?
Well, again, I'm a story kind of guy. I talked to a guy one time in my last time around, had a piece of property up in Tahoe, Lake Tahoe, a big piece of property, had a whole bunch of dead trees on it. So this guy decides to go out and cut all the dead trees down. And I'd make that very easy to do. You got to get an arbitrist. You can't clear cut your property, but find somebody who knows what they're doing, give it a proper opinion, cut all the permit costs, all that kind of stuff, get rid of all that. But you got to get proper permission. That may be fair. Well, anyway, he cuts all these trees down, and the city finds out about it. They take him to court. They're going to sue him for a bunch of money. And in San Jose, by the way, it's $750 a tree just to cut one down if it's healthy, even. Anyway, at the end of the day, they end up taking him to court. Well, the good news, a fire comes along, and sort of, and this particular guy's piece of property survives. And the way the story goes, he gets in front of the judge, and he says, "Hey, judge, I'm here, but this is what I did. And I prepped my property, and my house didn't burn down." And the judge says, "Get out of here."
No, I
End of story.
as a kid, we used to go up to my aunt and uncle's place in Big Bear, and during the summer, and we would cut up all the down trees that had died over the year and fallen, and make it for firewood for the winter for my aunt and uncle. Today, if you've been up to Big Bear recently, the amount of down trees that they have that are just laying there because they're not allowed to do that is an issue, and it's
Oh,
a hotbed issue.
you're on the same page on that one. I think, I spent 25 years in the Scouts, got to be, sort of management at one time. Then I got daughters, so I changed a little bit. And then I went I've been in the Sierra Club for years. I ran the backpacking section as a chair for a bunch of years. Spent a whole bunch of trips up in Yosemite, clearing up around campsites to get the dead wood and stuff around. So I've physically done that, until my knees crapped out. So at the end of the day, I've done all that kind of stuff. And I think that is absolutely needs to be made so it's so simple and as low a cost as possible. I mean, in Scouts, we used to have a deal where if somebody had a piece of property, they're retired or something, they couldn't take care of it. You call up and you get an Eagle Scout project. I know it's kind of corny, but we used to do this stuff.
Yeah.
We go up to their house and you chop it all up, and in a lot of cases, the small stuff you made in the squirrel huts or something. But the big stuff there was people that were tickled pink to come get the firewood, right? You just had to put it on the side of the road. So you put a log, you lit on the side of the road, and you wait about 2 days, and it's gone, right?
Yeah.
So
With that said, like, connecting Cal Fire and local, cities and, at a really community level, that I think that's a disconnect because it's not happening. And I think if
right,
the department and, all of us here in California that live in these areas, I mean, it's pretty much the entire state, would be, more focused on the abatement and the mitigation, then perhaps it wouldn't have these. I mean, we're still going to have the cat losses, but maybe we can help prevent, the extra acreage of burn if we could just all collectively be involved. Now,
We
switching
can
gears.
we can stop the fuel. If we get rid of the fuel,
Yeah.
we can't ever stop all the lightning strikes,
Yeah.
a power
Yeah.
line collapsing or whatever. But if we mitigate a lot of the fuel issues, that could help in the future.
Well,
That's a
you and I talk
no-brainer.
about it a lot, Daniel, just our clients. I mean, when we have educated conversations with our insureds about, hey, listen, Mr. Jones, if you get this and plant this and move this, I mean, we can get these different things, get carriers excited about insuring your property. Most consumers, guys, they're into it. It's
Yeah.
not like they're not into protecting their properties, because for many, it's their biggest and best asset.
Correct.
One of the things I think as an independent agent, and I know Daniel can speak to it too, is there's a lot of disconnect between the agents, the Department of Insurance, and the insurance companies. If elected, do you have any thoughts about kind of creating a, kind of a place where we can all coexist harmoniously and, be in better communication with each other? Because I feel like, we're looking to the department to help us with communication with our clients and making these carriers be enforced by the rules that they're supposed to be. And then the carriers want us to sell their products, but then they're not making it very easy for us to sell, or they're, ornery with the rates or claims or whatever. Is there any thoughts there on, creating this place where everyone is this powerful ecosystem of positivity? Is that attainable?
Well, for starters, okay. One of my best friends also has helped me in the campaign a little bit. Is a person like you, sells insurance. I'm not sure he's independent. I think he is. So at the end of the day, he has had complaints where he had something where he got tied up for, I don't know, 6 months, a year, or some silly thing because somebody did something. He did something slightly wrong. Anyway, it's complicated. I don't know the gory details. But at the end of the day, you're absolutely right. He needs something like that. But that his complaint was that when he did call the insurance, I mean, CDI, he got crickets. Nobody called him back, that sort of thing. So at the end of the day, it's like a million years ago, I got a chance to sit down with the president of Motorola. And Motorola at the time was, the electronics company, sadly no more. So at the end of the day, I asked him, well, how do you know your 5,000 employees are doing a good job? He said, all I gotta know is my customers are happy. Oh, okay. So I asked this guy, our insurance people said, are your customers, which in this particular case is, an agent, this also applies to maybe insurance companies even, and also individuals. But if there's nobody in the insurance office that's responding to people, that's an issue. On the other hand, I also found out that I don't believe this number, but somebody told me that if you take the number of complaints, divide by the number of employees, you get like 400 or 500. So if that's true, okay, so as an insurance commissioner, how am I supposed to fix that? Can I hire more people? Maybe. AI is an interesting thing, by the way. I got some people doing it on my end that are pretty interesting what these people can do to short circuit some of the stuff, or put a whole bunch of people in the same categories and do a whole bunch at one time because they're all the same question, that kind of thing. At the end of the day, I think that's a tool that we might be able to do that. But for starters, the insurance commissioner's office got to have the resources and the people to be able to respond to people. Because if you have a question and then nobody calls you back, that's just gonna make you mad, right?
Yeah.
Well, I
With
think
AI, I mean, I agree, Robert. I mean, there's so many opportunities there. A lot of the questions that come in, and I know Samantha's probably seen as much as I have, it's the insured calls in because they're unhappy because their rate went up, but they got rid of a liability only 25-year-old car and they bought a brand new car and they're like, they don't understand why their rate went up. And so those are every one of those complaints that Department of Insurance is supposed to be looking at. And then they have to send it to the agent, they have to send it to the carrier. I mean, I've had to deal with my share of those over the years, and it's funny when you start talking to somebody at the department, they're like, yeah, we have to do this, and it's 5 to 10 hours of our time on each one of these.
Yeah.
yeah, there has to be a better way to go, because there are the legit fraudulent moments, which we're going to talk about in a second. But then there's also this kind of BS type stuff that's going on because a consumer doesn't understand, or because they think that they've been wronged, and it's hey, you signed this or you bought this and this is what it is. And so I think that there's it's not that the department, yes, I do think that they could implement AI to better serve that moment and be faster at responding. But like Daniel said, it is a big laborious task for, their investigation team. The fraud thing, though, is something that we've talked about with every single candidate. There's not enough people in the department to really go through the real fraud stuff. The bad news agents that are doing bad things, or people trying to commit insurance fraud. If elected, What's your position on staffing that part of the department up?
I think I would be the best news that the county of California has ever had. But the bottom line is, in my business, I've been hit a couple of times with some fraud things. And my workman's comp company, ask me if I remember their name, I don't. I just signed the check. But at the end of the day, they fight all the fraud cases, no matter what. Now, if I tell it's legit, then that's the end of it. But if they tell them it's fraud, they fight them all. And guess what? That means all the junkyard dog types out there, and don't take it wrong, that are going to come after me later. They know they're going to fight it. They're not going to get their, here's a check and go away type moment. That's a plus. So anyway, the bottom line is I would do absolutely everything. I did talk to somebody in the office, and they made a comment like they've saved $60 million over the course of a year or something. Okay, you saved $60 million in the state of California over a year. Now, to me, that's a handful of cases, if that, right? I mean, there might be somebody out there that gets $60 million off. I got hit by somebody, my back's broken, and they're out washing their brand new car the next day. That kind of thing. So
Nuclear claims.
yeah. So how you deal with that within the framework of the rules? Now that's another discussion. But I conceptually think that that's a great thing to do. Absolutely, I would triple their staff, and I kind of like the idea of in some places where you get a reward for turning somebody in, but I don't want to have a Gestapo either. So you got to balance that. So it's at the end of the day, I think the fraud thing. If you're going to lower rates, you got to lower the cost to the insurance company. You got to lower the risk. And, all these things we talked about rate increases. I'm going to be a big person about how do we lower them in the first place. And to lower them in the first place, you got to change a bunch of rules and regulations, and then we're right back to Sacramento again.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So
Well, we
that's the
talked
problem.
about we've talked about it with some of the other candidates. Is there a pathway to tort reform that the insurance commissioner can put in place? Samantha and I were chatting on the phone. I've used this example a number of times. I was on the 5 freeway in Commerce, and I was stopped in dead stop traffic, and I'm like, oh my God, Samantha, look around me here. I got 9 billboards, personal injury attorneys talking about these multi-million-dollar verdicts.
And my wife, we joke that too. Keep going.
Nowadays, these attorney firms are being funded by private hedge fund companies and things like that to go after these bigger verdicts. And I know I've seen it, and I know Samantha's seen it. My client will be in a minor accident. And the next thing I do, I get a letter from an attorney saying, "What's your client's policy limits?" And they want us to divulge what the client's coverages are. My opinion is file the case based on its merit of the damages. Don't be asking what the policy limits is. If I tell you it's a $2 million policy, you're going to file it for $2 million. If I tell you it's $1 million, you file it for $1 million. If I tell you it's 300,000, you file it for 300,000. Whether it's a broken finger, a broken toe, or broken back, how do you feel we can work with the insurance commissioner's office to work towards a tort reform to stop these nuclear claims, which in turn raise the cost to the insurance carrier, which in turn raises the rates to everybody else?
Okay, well, that one's not necessarily simple, but the concept is if we could figure out a way to get the information out so what happens is the people that read those billboards, oh, I could be an instant millionaire. That message is loud and clear. They all agree. But the message is not clear is that all the other people are paying for that. And everybody seems to think that insurance companies are have an infinite supply of money, and to a certain extent, I'm in that camp to a certain extent. So as an insurance commissioner, I've got to find ways of the other side of the narrative. We need to do this because if we do this, the number's got to be huge, by the way. And say if we save this kind of money, and then go back to the insurance company, hey, if I'm going to save you guys X amount of dollars, what does that mean to my rates, right? So it's got to be a two-way street, right? So if the insurance commissioner says, okay, we're going to figure out a way to fix tort reform, which conceptually I'm all for, and I'm not sure I can. So I don't want to sit here and promise a bunch of stuff that I don't think I can. Let politicians do that. But at the end of the day, if there's a way for me to actually do some of this stuff and at least wave the flag, and do podcasts or whatever it takes, whatever it takes to get the word out, because that's about all I can really probably do as far as I can tell sitting in this chair today. Then get the people in California to understand, hey, wait a second, these lawyers, not the people themselves, but are making a killing on this, which is coming out of your bank account. Just maybe we can get the narrative turned around a little bit. But those same people that are making those billboards obviously have an insane amount of money to spend on this kind of stuff. And it's all about messaging. Virtually everything's like that. So at the end of the day, as long as people don't realize it's costing them personally, when you go to vote, most people don't care what they're voting for until it affects them personally. Checkbook, bottom, your pocketbook stuff, right? And I still believe that's true. So at the end of the day, we got to find a way to change that.
My practice is apartment buildings, property. That's where I've made a impact in insurance. And the claims, you have these attorneys that they're literally throwing everything at the book, just wanting the policy to trigger in some way, shape, or form. So then there is a payout. And so, yes, it affects the insureds, it affects the claimant over the time period because it's going to follow them around. And then it also, is affecting the way that policies are written. I mean, the exclusion list when I started in insurance 25 years ago was nothing like you see a policy. I mean, the conditions and the exclusions are very different size in a policy. So, I think it's definitely something as a industry, we have to set a cadence of communication and what's acceptable and what's not acceptable. And I think California being such a leader, with the litigious moments, maybe we can be the one that switches the narrative, over time. But I do think it's a collective situation. That said, when it comes to claims, we on the front lines here as the agents are the ones that we're fielding those calls. And we're, dealing with people in the worst moment of their lives. I was on the phone with a client watching his house burn down in Altadena, and he's like, Sam, what do I do? And, I'm walking him through the process in real time. And that's something we do a lot. It's our time to shine. It's our time to have our best moment. They've paid the premium and now the carrier's got the promise to pay. But what's happening is our carriers aren't necessarily always shining along with us. And I don't know if you've ever had an experience in business where you had a carrier not do what you thought they were going to do or in a timely fashion. What is your stance on the department's, focus of getting these carriers to respond to claims faster and actually do what they're supposed to do in a matter that makes sense and is, something that industry-wide can be adhered to? I mean, just in the news last week, we saw that, California's coming down after State Farm for not holding up their end of the bargain in the Palisades. So what do you say to that?
Okay, well, from a personal experience, that I haven't had a house burned down, but one of our best friends had a house up in Santa Rosa, and I think that's 5, 6 years ago now when that Santa Rosa burned down, this catastrophic fire up there, and I think they're still kind of waiting for some of this stuff. But I did look at your question, and a couple of ideas might be: what if the insurance company, they're supposed to pay out an X amount of time, right? It's supposed to be what, 60 days, whatever it is. Okay, but their inspector guys show up. This is what happened to this guy. And they say, well, we got this detail and that detail, and this isn't right. So maybe we come up with a third party group that can do that sort of thing, except then who controls those strings? It's kind of like your watchdog guys, right? And you can be careful. But at the end of the day, have some third party people go to that and say, hey, your insurance agent, or not an agent, not, I mean you guys, but the company, your guy says you don't qualify because of X. People need to have a third party. Maybe this is an insurance commissioner job. Have people in the insurance committee that actually work for the insurance committee. That's their job, is to go out and look at these things and decide if, be the judge and jury on the spot and say, okay, you need to pay up now versus, like you said, 4 or 5, 6, maybe never years later. I have a problem with that. And so maybe we add an interest penalty. Say, okay, Mr. Insurance Company, you said you'd pay off in X amount of time. You want to delay it for 2 years? Okay, we'll charge you 20% a year until you settle it, if it's in the insurer's favor, that sort of thing. So they're more motivated to, you got to find ways to motivate. It's all about dollars and cents, right? From my point of view, if you got a big payout and you can figure out some way to delay, well, why not, right? It doesn't cost them anything. If you fix that point where all of a sudden it started costing them something, or like your legal fees, and like when I won my case, I got my legal fees. Guy didn't have it. That's a different detail, but theoretically, I'm supposed to get a check. Never happened. But at the end of the day, I mean, there's got to be issues like that we can do. But again, reading between the lines in some of these documents, I'm not too sure the insurance commissioner can actually do any of that stuff. So
we have the public adjusters, which are that third party that you would think would be in the focus of the consumer, but then again, they forget to a lot of times mention that they're getting 25-30% off the top of the claim payout, and they go in and inflate prices and make things a little bit more difficult. So that part of it, I think the idea of it is right, but the rollout of what we actually see on the ground, I mean, there's a fire and those people are out chasing. They're looking for the people at their lowest moment that they can take advantage of, and it's a horrible part. There's the dirty dark side of insurance, Daniel.
There is, and I know,
and that's what people think of. That's what whether it's true or not, that's certainly what at least my people think it's true. At the end of the day, it's not about the gory detail. It's, you're talking about, I want to do this wonderful thing. Okay? I want to put a box around it. But at the end of the day, The detail, like for instance, if the insurance guys can stop any rate increase by filing a single piece of paper, which I believe is true. Okay, if it's legitimate, and what your point is when they do this adjustment, is it legitimate or not, or are they getting what amounts to a kickback? Now, I have a problem with that. So you're telling me to get a 25 or 30% kickback. That's stupid. I'm sorry. But
Well, you mentioned
can fix
the
that.
rate filing again, and most people don't know this, but California Fair Plan did an analysis 2 years ago what rate they really needed to be successful. They needed a
Okay.
70% rate increase. They applied for a 50% with the Department of Insurance. They got 15. So those numbers don't balance out, and that's why the California Fair Plan is being just flooded with policies because they're artificially too low because they're not allowed to raise the rate to what they need it to be, which would basically, if it was at the right rate that they needed, and I will even say just the 50% increase they needed, we'd get more than non-admitted carriers into the marketplace, and competition's good in the industry. The more carriers, the more opportunities I have to give my client I give them one application they can, sorry, I only have one place for you. It's California Fair Plan and a DIC policy. Or I have the California Fair Plan and the DIC policy, or I have Orion 180, LyteSpeed, Delos, Heritage, whatever it is. You can pick from these 7 different places. Which way do you want to go? You and I know that, since you're a business owner as well, you and I know competition is good and drives down prices. The more
Yep.
opportunities, the more choices you have, makes it better for the consumer.
Yeah, exactly. On the other hand, at the moment, I think the fair plan is, in a lot of cases, is the only choice. That's one problem. But the second choice is that's an argument for some kind of catastrophic, equivalent of a flood insurance, equivalent of earthquake insurance. I don't know how you pull that off, but I was talking to somebody who had this idea. I thought it's kind of a good idea. So the fair plan is kind of in that category. If I understand it right, fair plan is only fire insurance. You guys can answer that question.
It is the only
Everything else you got to buy extra anyway, right?
Yeah, and I would say probably 30 to 40% probably of the homes in the fair plan really do not qualify to be in the fair plan because there's not enough coverage because they max out at $3 million.
Well, I said my next door neighbor's daughter, she went to Lloyd's of London to get insurance.
Yep.
It's cracking me up.
Yep.
So it's like, okay,
And some of the non-admitted are backed by Lloyd's of London.
whatever. But I mean, to me, conceptually, that's just plain silly.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, it's a reasonable problem. And then the other minor detail, if there is something catastrophic like the earthquake thing, if there's a major earthquake, would California earthquake insurance be able to pay off, or are they going to go broke anyway? I think that's a perception that needs to be dealt with.
That's a good question.
So the fair plan's in the same category. If people have all this insurance, they think, and a something paradise kind of thing happens, and all of a sudden the state of California says we're broke, which by the way we are. Last I checked, California's in big trouble. At the end of the day, now what, right?
Well,
so that's a tough
Robert,
question.
we always like to ask our interviewees here, headline your term, if elected, what would you like to see your top 3 bullet points? Like, I did X, Y, and Z. Like, what are those top 3 things that you're running in here going, this is what I'm going to get done?
Okay, well, number one, I go to my employees of the CDI and say, and I treat people fairly. At the end of the day, did I support you? Did I give you the resources as best I can to let you do your job as best you can? That's what's kept my business for 50 years. I've got employees work for me, came out of high school and retired on me at this point. So at the end of the day, I think that's important because if you keep your people happy, they'll keep your customers happy. And that's number 2. Number 2, did I make life for Californians in general better? And that's a tough question. And in general, it means that not necessarily the rates went down, but people are treated, think about the fair plan. People are getting treated fairly, whatever that really means. And then third, and this is maybe the biggest one, is figure out how in the heck you can get Sacramento to fix some of these massive problems in the first place. Prevention, prevention, prevention. All these big fires, they're man-made, right? I have a friend of mine who works for PG&E, and it's not a good thing, but in their defense, they've got some zillion miles of 100-plus-year-old power lines in the world. Well, they're going to fall down, guys. That's what's going to happen. And we got high-speed trains to nowhere. So maybe we take some of these resources and go back and fix some of California infrastructure. And by the way, also all the prep and all the rules and regulations for all you to prep your property. I'm a big person on prevention. So if there's a way, the last line, to have new rules, less regulations, make it a lot easier for people to be prepared in the first place. You don't need insurance in the first place. And nobody wants their house to burn down. I mean, that's just plain stupid.
No.
So at the end of the day, if you could figure out a way to protect your house quickly, efficiently, without having to go get a whole bunch of permits and whatnot, sign me up for that. So if I leave a legacy of figuring out ways to prepare for these disasters properly in the first place, that would be it.
I like it. And I like
like
it. And I can't say thank you enough for your time today, Robert. You know, both Daniel and I have had such a great time interviewing you guys and your big levers, your mission, your vision, and where you kind of see California going with respect to the insurance marketplace. Again, this conversation is not political. We're not endorsing any candidates. What we are doing
fine.
is getting the information out to the people so that they can make the best decision come June 2nd in the primary race. We hope that everybody was kept up to speed.